This dog can read people's thoughts. What he uncovers changes everything. I know what you're thinking. Those were the first words that slipped out of my mouth that morning. The ones I still don't know how I managed to say so calmly, considering what had just happened in my living room in the quiet suburbs of Colorado. I had woken up thinking it was going to be a normal day, just like all the others. But everything changed the second my dog looked up at me with those soft brown eyes, tilted his head, and somehow responded to a thought I was certain I had never spoken out loud. Before we continue, welcome to the story, and welcome to Paws Society. Thank you so much for watching our videos and for supporting our channel. Please remember to like and subscribe because it helps us more than you know. And if you have a story you want to share, make sure to comment below and include where you're from. Thank you, and have a great day. I didn't understand what was happening right then, but I do now. And as unbelievable as it sounds, this is where everything truly begins. I stood in the middle of my living room, frozen, unsure of what I had just witnessed. Max, my golden retriever, sat calmly on the rug, tail moving in a slow sweep as if he were waiting for me to speak again. But I couldn't. My throat felt tight, not in a frightening way, but in a way that told me life had just taken a sharp turn, one that wouldn't allow me to go back to the quiet, predictable rhythm I'd known for years. I remember blinking a few times, trying to process what had just happened, hoping maybe I had imagined it all. But then Max lifted his paw gently and tapped the floor twice. 2 taps. I had been silently counting in my head, trying to steady myself. Max didn't just hear my thoughts, he mirrored them. My name is Danielle Harper. I grew up in a small white American family in rural Kansas before moving out to Colorado for work, thinking it would be just mountains, open roads, and peace. And for the most part, it was. I lived a simple life, working at a small publishing company in Denver, and spending most of my afternoons taking Max on long walks through the quiet parks in my neighborhood. I always believed Max was special. Everyone who met him said he was smart, that he understood things more quickly than other dogs. But what I discovered that morning went far beyond being smart. It felt like magic, and yet so completely real. I had adopted Max from a local shelter 2 years prior. He had been described as friendly, calm, and eager to please. The staff said he had been found wandering along the outskirts of town, with no tags, no microchip, no one to claim him. They told me he seemed to listen in a way that made you wonder what was going through his mind. At the time, I took it as a cute description, something meant to draw in potential adopters. But now, standing in my living room with Max staring up at me like he was waiting for my next thought, I realized the staff hadn't exaggerated at all. They simply hadn't known the full truth. I slowly sat down on the edge of the couch, feeling the soft cushion beneath me, as Max rose and walked over, placing his head gently on my knee. My hand instinctively moved to his fur. It was warm, soft, and comforting, the way it always had been. But this time, there was something else, a closeness I couldn't explain. It felt like he was reaching out to me, not physically, but mentally, standing right at the doorway of something deeper. I didn't know how to open that door, or even if I should, but Max didn't seem worried. If anything, he seemed patient. "Did you just hear me?" I asked quietly, feeling slightly ridiculous. But Max lifted his head, looked straight at me, and I felt something shift inside my mind. Not a voice, not words, not anything loud or dramatic, just a gentle pressure, like an emotion brushing up against my own. A sense of yes. I felt it before I even processed it. My breath hitched. Max stepped closer, leaning more of his weight against me. I wanted to panic, but instead I felt a strange calm settle over me. Maybe it was shock, or maybe it was because Max had always been a grounding presence in my life. Either way, that calm held me together as I tried to understand the new world I had just stepped into. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. I remember making coffee, my hands trembling slightly as I poured milk into the cup. Max sat nearby, watching me, his tail brushing the floor occasionally. I kept thinking about asking him more questions, trying to understand the limits of his ability. But each time I opened my mouth, the questions got stuck in my throat. How do you even begin to talk to a dog who can read your thoughts? What do you say first? Where do you even start? Despite my confusion, Max remained calm. Whenever I felt overwhelmed, he nudged his head under my hand as if reminding me he was there. And every now and then, that soft, emotional echo brushed my mind. It wasn't invasive. It wasn't overwhelming. It was gentle, comforting, and so strangely familiar. Later that afternoon, I decided to take Max for a walk. I needed fresh air, something familiar to ground myself. The sun was shining through the windows, casting long, warm lines across the floor. Max wagged his tail when I picked up his leash, but deep down, I felt like he already knew my decision before I made it. Something about that realization made my heart beat a little faster. We stepped outside and walked down the sidewalk toward the nearby park. My neighborhood was quiet, made up mostly of families and older couples. The lawns were always neatly trimmed, the air clear, and the mountains visible in the distance. It was the kind of place where people greeted each other politely, where kids rode bikes in the evenings, and where you could hear wind chimes on breezy days. As we approached the park, Max slowed down, glancing toward a bench near the entrance. An older white American man sat there, looking tired, his hands clasped together. I didn't think much of it at first. People often sat at the park to rest or enjoy the scenery. But Max paused, his tail lowering slightly before brushing against my leg. Then it happened again. That emotional whisper in my mind. This time it felt heavier, like concern. I followed Max's gaze and saw the man staring at the ground, his eyes distant. Something about his posture felt off. He didn't seem just tired. He seemed burdened, weighed down by something emotional. I didn't know why Max noticed him or why he cared, but I could feel it clearly through that quiet connection between us. "Do you want to go to him?" I whispered. Max didn't bark or tug, but he stepped forward, looking at me as if asking permission. I nodded, unsure of what was happening, but trusting him anyway. We walked toward the man slowly. Max stopped a few feet away and sat down, his eyes fixed on the stranger. I approached carefully, hoping not to startle him. When the man finally looked up, his eyes widened slightly as he noticed Max. "He's beautiful," the man said quietly, his voice hoarse. "Thank you," I replied, forcing a small smile. Max stayed still, watching him. The man's gaze drifted from Max to me and back again. I felt that same wave of concern from Max, like he was sensing something deeper. Before I could say anything else, the man took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I'm just having a rough day." I nodded gently. "I'm sorry to hear that." For a moment, silence settled between us. Max moved closer and rested his chin gently on the man's knee. The man stiffened in surprise, then slowly lifted his hand to pet him. As he did, I felt another soft echo in my mind, a mix of sadness and hope. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Max's either. It was as if Max was sharing what he felt from the man. The man exhaled slowly, his shoulders relaxing as he stroked Max's fur. "I don't know why," he murmured, "but it feels like he understands." I swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. Max lifted his head slightly and nudged the man's hand again. The man gave a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," he whispered to Max. We stayed there for a little while longer. The man didn't talk much, and I didn't ask any questions. But Max stayed close, offering silent comfort. When the man finally stood up to leave, he wiped his eyes discreetly and murmured a quiet goodbye. As he walked away, I watched Max carefully. His ears were relaxed, his tail moving slowly but steadily. That emotional whisper in my mind faded into something calmer, softer. "You really did know," I whispered, half in awe. Max looked up at me with warm eyes, and I knew. He understood more than I had ever imagined. We continued our walk, moving deeper into the park, where sunlight filtered through the tall trees. I felt lighter somehow, even though I didn't fully understand what had just happened. It was as though Max had shown me something important, something I wouldn't ever forget. As the days passed, I started noticing more moments like that. Moments where Max seemed to sense emotions that weren't obvious. Moments where he guided me toward people or situations that felt meaningful. I didn't always understand his reasons, and he couldn't speak to explain them, at least not with words. But through that gentle connection, I knew when something mattered to him. One afternoon, about a week after that first strange morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with Max lying at my feet. I was thinking about a project for work, feeling stressed about approaching deadlines. My thoughts were scattered, jumping from one worry to another. Max suddenly stood up, placing his front paws on my leg. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead lightly against my knee. Warmth flowed through the connection. Comfort, reassurance, a gentle reminder to breathe. I felt myself relax instantly. "How do you know?" I whispered. Max lowered his head and rested it on my thigh. I closed my eyes, letting his presence wash over me. That moment made me wonder just how deep his ability went. Was he only sensing emotions, or was he reading thoughts more clearly than I realized? I didn't know how to test it without feeling strange, but the question stayed with me. That weekend, I decided to try something different. I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, with Max sitting across from me. The house was quiet, sunlight drifting in through the windows. I took a deep breath and focused on a single thought. Ball. Max's ears perked up immediately. His tail wagged. He stood up, walked to the basket of toys in the corner, and pulled out his favorite blue ball. I stared, stunned. "Max," I whispered, "you really can." He dropped the ball in my lap and nudged my hand, tail wagging faster. I tried again. This time, I focused on a different thought. Treat. Max spun around, trotting to the kitchen and sitting in front of the drawer where I kept the treats. I felt a mix of excitement and disbelief swirl in my chest. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. Max could read my thoughts clearly. As the days continued, I tried more tests. I thought of specific people. I thought of places. I thought of sit, play, walk, and Max responded every time. I thought of a friend from work, and Max brought me the scarf she had gifted me last Christmas. I thought of the park, and Max went straight to the front door, sitting patiently as if ready to leave. But it wasn't just commands or objects. Max reacted to emotions, memories, moments I hadn't spoken about in years. One night, I sat on my bed, thinking about my late grandmother, remembering how she used to bake cookies on Saturday mornings when I was a child. My chest felt tight with nostalgia. Max climbed onto the bed and curled beside me, nestling close, offering warmth and quiet comfort. And once again, that gentle whisper of emotion brushed against my mind. I didn't know what to do with this extraordinary discovery. It felt too big to keep to myself, yet too precious to share with the wrong people. What would happen if others found out? Would they understand? Would they be afraid? Would they try to take Max away? The thought terrified me, and Max sensed it instantly. He pressed closer, letting that calming sense flow through the connection. "Okay," I whispered, stroking his fur. "It's our secret. For now." Max lay still, as if agreeing. But secrets don't always stay hidden. And as much as I wanted to keep Max protected, the world had a way of pulling us into situations we never expected. It started on a Thursday afternoon. I was driving home from work with Max in the back seat, his head resting out the window as he enjoyed the breeze. The sky was clear, the radio was low, and everything felt peaceful. But the moment I turned onto my street, Max's behavior changed. He pulled his head back inside, ears up, body tense. I felt something through the connection, urgency. "What is it?" I asked, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. He didn't respond physically, but the feeling grew stronger. I drove slowly, scanning the street. That's when I noticed a woman standing near my driveway. She looked anxious, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. She was a white American woman, probably in her 50s, with short blonde hair and a faded blue denim jacket. I didn't recognize her. Max barked once, low and soft. Not a warning, a nudge. I parked the car, stepped out, and Max hurried to my side. "Can I help you?" I asked gently. The woman's eyes darted between me and Max. "I'm sorry to bother you," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Are you Danielle?" I nodded cautiously. "Yes." She took a shaky breath. "I didn't know where else to go. My name's Laura. I live a few streets over." Max stayed alert at my side, tail still but not stiff. I felt his concern again. "What's going on?" I asked softly. Laura wrung her hands together. "It's my son, Evan. He's 17. He's been having a hard time lately, more than I can understand. I heard from a neighbor that you have a dog who helps people. I don't know what that means exactly, but I'm willing to try anything." My heart tightened. She must have heard about the man in the park. Word traveled fast in quiet neighborhoods. I didn't know how to explain Max's ability, and I certainly couldn't reveal the truth outright. But Max stepped forward, easing closer to Laura. He sniffed the air gently, then sat down at her feet, tail sweeping the ground. Laura's eyes softened. "He's so sweet." I felt that familiar pulse from Max, a soft, gentle sorrow, the kind you feel when someone is carrying something heavy. "Do you want us to come with you?" I asked Max quietly. He looked at me, then nudged my leg. Laura watched us carefully but didn't question it. "We can come by," I finally said, "if that's okay with you." Laura nodded quickly, relief flooding her face. "Please, I'd appreciate it." I didn't know what Max sensed. I didn't know what we were walking into, but I trusted him completely. And as we followed Laura toward her home a few streets over, I realized this was only the beginning. Max wasn't just reading thoughts. He was guiding me toward people who needed help, people who carried something inside them that he could sense and respond to in ways no human ever could. And deep down, I knew something even bigger was coming. Max knew things I couldn't understand yet. And whatever he uncovered next, it would change everything. Something's wrong here. That was the first thought that formed in my mind as Max and I followed Laura through her quiet neighborhood, and Max reacted to it instantly. His ears twitched, his steps grew slower, and that subtle emotional echo brushed gently against me. Not alarm, but something closer to anticipation. It was as though he wanted me to keep following, to trust that wherever this path led, he had a reason for choosing it. The Colorado sunlight was beginning to turn golden, stretching across the sidewalks as we walked behind Laura. The breeze was soft, carrying the light scent of pine from the tall trees lining the street. Everything looked peaceful on the surface, but the deeper we went into her neighborhood, the more I began to sense a heaviness coming from Max. Not fear, just a focused attention he rarely displayed unless something significant was unfolding around us. Laura kept glancing back nervously, offering a weak smile whenever our eyes met. It was clear she was holding something back. Parents often carry their worries quietly, trying to manage them on their own until they can't anymore. Max stayed close to my side, occasionally brushing against my leg in a reassuring way. His mind touch was faint, but persistent, like he wanted me to be ready. He seemed to know that whatever was happening inside Laura's home wasn't something simple. When we reached her house, a modest, pale blue two-story place with a wide porch and a few decorative plants near the steps, Max paused. He didn't resist going forward, but he took a moment, sniffing the air gently. That emotional nudge came again, this time tinged with sadness. Not overwhelming, but clear enough that I felt it. Laura fumbled with her keys for a moment before finally opening the door. The inside of the house was quiet, unusually quiet. When she stepped aside to let us in, I noticed her living room was tidy, organized, and filled with warm, earth-toned furniture. A family portrait hung above the fireplace. Laura, a man who was likely her husband, and a teenage boy with light brown hair. The boy in the picture was smiling brightly, the kind of smile that came naturally from someone who felt free. But I could already sense that the boy in the photograph wasn't the one we were about to meet. Max sat just inside the doorway, scanning the room with calm eyes. I could feel his attention stretching beyond the walls, reaching for something deeper inside the house. Laura clasped her hands together. "He's in his room upstairs," she said softly. "He barely leaves it anymore." I nodded. "Do you want us to go up?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I think he might respond to him." She looked at Max with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Max started forward, and I followed. The stairs creaked softly under our steps. Halfway up, I felt Max slow again. A wave of tension washed through the connection. Not fear, but concern. The kind you feel when approaching something fragile. I placed a hand on his back gently, letting him know I was there. When we reached the second floor, Laura pointed toward a door at the end of the hallway. "That's his room." Her voice cracked slightly. "He hasn't talked to me much lately. I don't know what's going on with him." Max approached the door and sat down. I could feel his attention sharpening. Then, without warning, I felt a rush of emotion, a swirl of confusion, loneliness, and something that felt like longing. It wasn't Max's feeling. It wasn't mine either. It was as though Max had opened a small window into the boy's emotional world and was letting me sense the edges of it. I knocked softly. "Evan?" Silence. I tried again. "It's Danielle. I'm here with my dog Max. Your mom thought maybe you'd like to meet him." Still no answer. But Max nudged the door gently with his nose, then looked up at me. I exhaled slowly and turned the knob. The door opened without resistance. Evan's room was dim, lit only by the faint glow from the window. He sat at his desk, his back to us, his shoulders slumped. He didn't turn when we entered. Max stepped forward slowly, tail low but wagging softly, and sat just behind Evan. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Evan spoke, his voice low and quiet. "Why'd you bring someone here, Mom?" Laura's voice from behind us cracked again. "I thought you might want company." Evan didn't respond. He stared at something on his desk I couldn't see from where I stood. Max rose slowly and walked over to Evan's side. Instead of nudging him, Max sat down next to him and leaned gently against his leg. Evan stiffened, startled by the contact. "Hey," he whispered, looking down. Max stayed still, offering only his quiet presence. Evan's eyes softened just a little. He reached down slowly and rested his hand on Max's head. The connection surged, a wave of emotion, deep sadness, hidden fear, and confusion washed through me. Max was showing me what Evan felt. Not thoughts, not memories, just pure emotion. It was overwhelming, but Max kept it balanced, sharing just enough for me to understand. I spoke gently. "Evan, is something going on? You don't have to tell us anything, but Max thought maybe you needed someone to sit with you." Evan's jaw tightened. "He doesn't know me," he whispered. Max nudged him gently, and I felt that soft echo. Comfort. Evan swallowed hard and blinked rapidly, and I understood then. He wasn't just hurting, he was lost, unsure of how to explain something he didn't fully understand himself. Max could sense all of it. "What is it?" I asked softly. Evan shook his head. "It's nothing," but his voice trembled. Another wave came through the connection, a subtle plea. Max was urging him to trust us. "I don't know how to feel anymore," Evan finally whispered. "I don't know who I'm supposed to be. Everything feels too heavy. I don't want people to worry." My chest tightened. Max pressed closer, resting his head on Evan's knee. Evan exhaled shakily. "He's warm," he murmured, "like he can hear me." I smiled softly. "He listens better than anyone." For the next hour, Max remained by Evan's side. Evan talked a little, not much, just small pieces of what he was struggling with. He talked about feeling lost at school, about feeling like he wasn't good enough, about not wanting to disappoint anyone. He didn't go into detail, but the emotions behind his words told the real story. When we finally left Evan's room, Laura hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I've been so worried about him." "Max knew he needed someone," I said gently. Max wagged his tail, brushing my leg. We left Laura's home as the day grew dim, walking back through the quiet streets as the first hint of evening settled over the neighborhood. The sky turned a soft amber, and the sounds of distant wind chimes drifted through the air. Max walked calmly beside me, but his presence felt stronger than ever. I knelt down on the sidewalk and wrapped my arms around him, feeling his warm fur against my cheek. "You did something good today," I whispered. Max licked my chin once, gently, and I felt that steady warmth flow through the connection. But even in that peaceful moment, I sensed something new beneath the surface, something deeper that Max wasn't ready to show me yet. A quiet murmur of anticipation, like he knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger. That night, after dinner, and a quiet evening curled up on the couch watching television, I lay in bed with Max sleeping at my feet. The moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting a faint glow across the room. I stared up at the ceiling, replaying the day's events, thinking about how quickly things were changing. Just a week ago, my life had been predictable. Now, every day brought something new, something extraordinary. At some point during the night, I drifted into sleep, But it wasn't long before I was startled awake by a sudden movement at the end of the bed. Max stood up abruptly, ears alert, gaze fixed toward the window. "Max?" I whispered, rubbing my eyes. He didn't move, didn't look away. Then came the feeling. A sharp burst of alertness through the connection. Focused, intense, urgent. I sat up quickly. "What is it?" Max leapt off the bed, rushed to the door, and pawed at it. My heart raced as I got up and opened the door. Max sprinted toward the living room. I followed quickly, flipping on a light. When I reached him, he was standing at the front window, staring outside. I moved beside him and peered through the glass. Nothing, just darkness, the faint glow of streetlights, and the quiet stillness of our neighborhood. But Max didn't relax. His stance stayed firm, tail still, ears forward. His mind touch pulsed again. Warning. "Max, what do you see?" He didn't move. His breathing grew slow and steady, like he was concentrating. Finally, after what felt like a full minute, his body softened slightly. The warning faded, replaced by something I couldn't decipher, a quiet unease. I knelt beside him. "Is someone out there?" He looked at me, held my gaze, then gently brushed his head against my arm. It didn't feel like reassurance. It felt like a request for patience. I locked the door again, turned off the lights, and returned to bed with Max close beside me. It took a long time to fall asleep again, and even then, Max remained awake for a while, watching the window. The next morning, nothing seemed out of place. The sun shone brightly, and the world looked as calm as ever. But Max's behavior stayed different. He was alert throughout breakfast, pacing occasionally near the front door. That faint unease lingered between us. Later that afternoon, while sitting on the couch and going through some emails, I felt it again. A sudden jolt, far stronger than the night before. Max ran to me, tail stiff, ears pinned back, eyes wide with urgency. "Max?" He pushed his head into my hand, sending a sharp pulse through the connection. A feeling formed in my mind, more distinct than anything he'd ever shared before. Not danger, not fear. Someone is coming. But who? And why did Max react this strongly? Before I could ask aloud, a knock echoed through the house. Max stiffened. I rose slowly and approached the door, heart racing. Max stayed glued to my side, his body rigid. I looked out the peephole. A man stood on my porch. A stranger, tall, white American, about mid-40s, wearing a gray jacket and holding a small notebook. His expression was calm, not threatening, but serious. I opened the door just an inch, keeping the chain on. "Can I help you?" I asked cautiously. He lifted his notebook slightly. "Good afternoon. My name's Robert Hayes. I live nearby." He offered a polite smile. "I was hoping to ask you something about your dog." Max's reaction intensified. Not fear, not aggression, recognition. A rush of emotion hit the connection. Surprise. Max knew something about him. But what? And how? The man waited patiently, unaware of the silent storm unfolding behind my eyes. Max stepped forward, placing himself partially between me and the door, his gaze locked onto the man on the porch. I tightened my grip on the door. "What do you want to know about my dog?" I asked carefully. Robert's expression softened slightly. "Your dog, he's special, isn't he?" Max's mind touch pulsed sharply. He knows. "He's unlike any dog I've seen before," Robert went on. "I noticed some things, and I think we should talk." My heart pounded. "How do you know anything about my dog?" He looked down for a moment, then back at me. "Because," he said softly, "I used to have one just like him. Max froze. The air between us tightened, the connection swelling with emotion, shock, recognition, and something else I couldn't understand. I stared at the man, trying to process his words, but before I could reply, Robert leaned closer. "There's a reason your dog can do what he does," he whispered, "and you deserve to know the truth." Max stepped forward again, inching closer to the door. The connection quivered. Not fear, not danger. Something far more complicated. Whatever this man knew, it was going to change everything, and Max knew it long before I did. "Max knows you," the man repeated, his voice steady but gentle, as if he understood how impossible his words sounded and didn't want to push too hard. But the moment he said them, Max's reaction became crystal clear. His entire body had gone still, not stiff with fear, not braced for danger, but frozen in the way a dog pauses when recognizing something they never expected to see again. I felt that shock ripple through the connection, sharp and undeniable. It wasn't fear, it wasn't discomfort. It was recognition mixed with an emotion I couldn't quite read, something layered and complex, as if Max was sorting through dozens of memories at once. I tightened my grip on the doorknob. "How could you possibly know anything about him?" I whispered. The man, Robert, didn't move closer. He kept his hands visible, palms open at his sides, in a calm, almost reassuring posture. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. "I'm not here for anything bad. I'm here because I've seen what your dog can do, and I've known another like him." Another like him. The words echoed in my mind, heavy and impossible. Max stood firm between me and the door, but he leaned just slightly toward Robert, as if torn between caution and familiarity. That conflicted pulse flooded the connection, leaving my chest tight. "What do you mean, another like him?" I asked slowly. Robert swallowed, choosing his words carefully. "Years ago, before I moved here, I had a dog named Willow. She was unbelievably smart. Too smart. She reacted before people spoke. She would go to strangers who needed help before they asked. She understood things no dog should have understood." He paused, looking directly at Max. "And the moment I saw your dog a few days ago, walking near the park, I recognized the same look, the same awareness." Max's tail twitched, not wagging, but shifting slightly, as if responding to memories he couldn't voice. The connection stirred. Nostalgia, sadness, and curiosity woven together. My voice barely came out. "What happened to her?" Robert sighed, eyes softening. "She passed away 3 years ago. Old age. But before she did, she opened my eyes to something I never expected." He hesitated. "Dogs like them. Dogs with this ability don't show up randomly. There's something unique about them. Something rare." Max stepped closer to the door, his nose inches from the gap between us and Robert. He inhaled deeply, then looked up at me, his eyes full of meaning I still couldn't quite translate. Robert continued quietly. "I know this sounds strange, but I can explain everything, if you're willing to listen. And if he nodded gently toward Max, is willing to let me." A flicker pulsed through the connection. Approval, hesitant, cautious, but real. Max was giving me the green light. I exhaled shakily. "Okay, let me unhook the chain." I slid the metal chain aside and opened the door fully. Max didn't bark, didn't growl. He simply watched every movement Robert made. The man stepped inside slowly, keeping his voice soft. "Thank you," he said. "I know letting a stranger in isn't easy." Max circled him once, sniffing his pant leg, his shoes, his hands. Then he sat down beside me, close enough that his fur brushed against my leg. "Can we sit?" Robert asked. "This might take a while." We moved to the living room. Max sat between us, watchful but calm. The golden afternoon light stretched across the carpet, warming the room with a soft glow. Despite everything, there was no tension, just a quiet anticipation filling the air as I waited for answers. Robert rested his notebook on his knee, but didn't open it yet. Before I explain what I know, I should tell you this. I'm not a scientist. I'm not some researcher studying anything. I'm just someone who saw something extraordinary and spent years trying to understand it. I nodded slowly. "Go on." He looked down for a moment. "When I adopted Willow, she was just a normal puppy. But as she grew, I started noticing things. She knew when I was upset, even before I showed it. She reacted to neighbors' emotions before they spoke. And one day, his eyes softened. She responded to something I was only thinking about. That's when I realized she wasn't just empathetic. She was reading me." My breath caught. "That's exactly how Max is." "I figured," Robert said gently. "That's why I came." Max nudged my hand, sensing my rising emotion. His warmth grounded me instantly. "There's something else," Robert continued. "Dogs like them. They're extremely rare, and from what I've learned over the years, they weren't bred or trained for it. They're born with it. Not every dog, just a few in each generation. It's something passed down naturally, almost like a trait that appears at random." My thoughts raced. "So you're saying Max was just born this way?" "Yes," he answered softly. "And there's more. Dogs like them don't just read thoughts. They seek out people who need help. It's almost like an instinct. Willow would do it all the time. She guided me to strangers who were hurting inside. She comforted people who didn't even say a word. It wasn't random. It was purposeful, intentional." A swell of realization washed through me. Evan, the man at the park, even the small moments when Max comforted me without me saying a word. Max wasn't just reacting. He was acting, choosing, guiding. Robert's eyes followed Max thoughtfully. "He's already helping people, isn't he?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, I think he knows who needs him before I do." The connection pulsed again, gentle pride. Robert leaned back, taking a slow breath. "There's another thing you should know. Dogs like them always find someone, a human partner. They choose one person to fully connect with, the person they trust most. With Willow, that was me. With Max, that's you." Max rested his head in my lap, confirming it without words. I bit the inside of my cheek, overwhelmed. "But why me?" Robert smiled faintly. "Because he sees something in you, something steady, something safe. Dogs like him don't choose at random. They choose people who can handle their gift." I lowered my hand, grazing Max's head as the weight of those words sank in. "There's more," Robert said, seriousness returning to his expression. "Max reacted to me earlier, strongly. That means he either senses something about me or recognizes something familiar." Max lifted his head, eyes sharp. "What could he recognize?" I asked. Robert opened his notebook slowly. Inside, I saw sketches, drawings of a dog, Willow, notes scribbled along the edges, observations, patterns. He flipped to a page with a small ink mark at the corner. "This," he said, tapping the page, "is Willow's last week. She was weaker, tired often, but her mind, her connection, became clearer, stronger. She showed me memories, her memories. I didn't understand most of it at the time, but I wrote down everything. Memories? I echoed. What kind of memories? Robert looked up with quiet gravity. Memories of other dogs like her. A chill ran down my spine. Max pressed closer to me. She remembered moments from her mother, and her mother remembered moments from another before her. They pass it down, not through training or teaching, but through instinct, through something deep inside them. I stared at him, stunned. So Max might have memories from before I adopted him? Robert nodded. Maybe not clear images, but impressions, recognitions, things that might feel familiar to him, even if he doesn't know why. The recognition, that pulse from Max when he saw Robert, it all made sense. Are you saying Max might remember Willow? Robert sighed softly. I don't know for sure, but his reaction tells me he senses something. Maybe Willow met another dog like him in her lifetime. Maybe Max is connected to that lineage somehow. Dogs like them, they seem to carry a shared awareness. Max moved closer to Robert, sniffing him again, slow and purposeful. Then Max looked at me, and that feeling spread through the connection. Understanding. Robert watched him quietly. He knows exactly what we're talking about, doesn't he? I nodded, the realization settling deeper. Sometimes it feels like he understands everything. He probably does, Robert murmured. For a while, none of us spoke. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and Max's soft breathing. The world outside seemed distant, muted. Finally, I found my voice. Why tell me all this? Why now? Robert closed the notebook gently. Because something is happening. Something I've been trying to understand for years. Before Willow passed, she became restless, just like Max has been. She sensed something approaching, something new. I didn't know what it was then, and I still don't know now. But when I saw Max react the same way the other night, I knew I had to come. My heart quickened. The other night? Yes, he said. When the street went quiet, when even the animals outside paused. I felt it too, not as clearly as Willow did, but enough to know something was shifting. Max lifted his head sharply. A pulse ripped through the connection. Alertness, not fear. Purpose. I swallowed. What does he sense? Robert's voice dropped to a whisper. That whatever Willow felt, it's getting closer. Max stood suddenly and walked to the window, staring into the distance. I followed him and placed a hand on his back. The connection trembled, not alarmed, but bracing. Then Max turned to me with an intensity I'd never felt before. A single feeling pushed into my mind. Soon. I knelt beside him, my heart pounding. Max, what's coming? He didn't turn back to the window. He kept staring at me, eyes deep and focused, as though trying to show me something just beyond my understanding. Robert approached slowly. He knows it's not dangerous, just important. They always reacted this way when something meaningful was about to happen. Max brushed his head against my shoulder, grounding me. Robert continued, I think whatever's coming, Max wants you to be ready. A wave of determination, not harsh or tense, but steady and warm, flowed through the connection. Then Max walked to the door and sat down, staring at the handle as if waiting. For what? I whispered. Max glanced back at me. Soon. Again. Robert exhaled deeply. He's preparing you. That's what Willow did with me. Something big is unfolding, something only these dogs can sense. You may not understand it yet, but he does. I sank onto the couch, heart racing, mind spinning. Max sat beside me, pressing into my side. And though I didn't understand what was coming, I knew one thing for certain. Max wasn't afraid. He was ready. And whatever he sensed in the world, whatever shift was approaching, he was determined to face it with me. But just as that realization settled, the quiet of the room broke. A soft tapping sound echoed from the porch. Not a knock, a soft, steady tapping. Max's head snapped toward the door. The connection surged, not fear, recognition. I stood slowly, every muscle tense, and moved toward the front door. Robert stayed still, eyes widening slightly. The tapping continued, gentle but deliberate. I reached the door, placed my hand on the knob, and hesitated. Max stepped forward, pressing against my leg. Through the connection came a rush of emotion. Hope. Hope. I turned the knob and opened the door, and there, sitting calmly on my porch, was another dog, a golden retriever, older, sitting perfectly still, watching Max. Max froze. My breath caught. Robert whispered behind me, voice trembling in awe. "Oh my goodness." "Max," I whispered, though my voice barely rose above the quiet evening air. The older golden retriever on my porch didn't move toward me, didn't even shift its paws. It simply sat there, watching Max with an expression I couldn't describe, something far too deep and knowing to belong to an ordinary dog. Max stood completely still beside me, his breathing steady, his posture balanced as if he were caught between two instincts, caution and recognition. The connection between us trembled with emotion, not loud or frantic, but steady and layered, like he was absorbing far more than I could possibly sense. The older dog's fur was a warm, sandy gold, flecked with lighter patches around the muzzle. Its eyes were calm, soft, full of something almost human. Those eyes locked onto Max's, and the moment their gazes met, I felt something ripple through the connection, an emotion so powerful it made my breath catch. It wasn't fear. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't even surprise. It was recognition. A deep, ancient kind of recognition, as though Max had spent his whole life waiting for this exact moment without knowing it. Behind me, Robert exhaled sharply. "I don't believe it," he whispered. That's Willow's daughter." My heart lurched. "What?" He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the dog. "I've seen her before, only once, years ago. After Willow passed, I met a breeder who took in some of Willow's extended line. Not for training, just for caretaking. This dog looks exactly like one of Willow's pups who disappeared from the facility when she was 2. No one could explain how she got out. They never found her. But this," his voice trailed off, trembling. "This is her. I'm sure of it." Max took a step forward. The older dog didn't move, didn't react with fear or excitement. It just watched him with gentle patience, like it was waiting for Max to make the first move. The connection surged. Emotion streamed through me, sharp, strong, and impossible to name. I wasn't just feeling Max's curiosity now. I was feeling something deeper, richer, something shaped by memories I could only guess at. Max stepped down one porch stair. The older dog stood. They approached each other slowly, their noses meeting in the middle. The instant they touched, a wave of emotion exploded through the connection. Warmth, recognition, familiarity, and something I didn't expect. Peace. Deep, overwhelming peace. It felt like watching two halves of something reunite. I placed a hand over my heart, unable to tear my eyes away. Robert stepped beside me, his voice barely audible. "This is no coincidence. Dogs like them. They find each other. They always have. Max pulled back slightly and looked over his shoulder at me. The emotion coming through our connection shifted, inviting me forward, urging me gently. I took a careful step outside. The evening air wrapped around us, cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of pine from the distant hills. The sky was a soft shade of lavender fading into deeper blue, and the street remained still and silent. Nothing moved except the two dogs standing before me, sharing a quiet understanding that transcended language. Max looked at the older dog again and nudged her gently. She responded by taking a step toward me. I felt a flutter of unease, not fear, but the overwhelming sense that I was standing on the edge of something I didn't yet understand. The older dog approached slowly and sat down right in front of me. She looked up at me with those calm, knowing eyes. I crouched carefully, extending my hand. She sniffed it gently, then tilted her head with an expression so soft and filled with meaning that tears pooled in my eyes. It was the same look Max gave me when he was trying to show me something deeper. Does she? I swallowed. Does she have the ability to? Robert nodded. If she's who I think she is, yes, absolutely. The older dog pressed her head into my hand. A warm wave washed over me, not as strong or direct as Max's connection, but familiar in a way that made my heart ache. She's showing you something, Robert murmured. Emotion rose in my chest, thick and overwhelming. Not mine, hers. Loss, memory, searching, and then something softer. Finding. She pulled back gently and turned to Max, nudging him with her nose. Max responded with a soft tail sweep and stepped closer to her. They touched foreheads. The connection between Max and me lit up with a burst of feeling so vivid it nearly knocked me backward. Memories, fleeting, fragmented, not fully mine, flashed like distant echoes. A younger golden running through tall grass, a woman's voice calling softly, another dog beside her, a sense of warmth and belonging. Then it shifted. Darkness, cold, loneliness, and a feeling of searching that stretched endlessly. I gasped and reached for the porch railing for balance. Max stepped back from the older dog and looked at me with deep concern. The connection steadied, his warmth pulling me back to the present. I'm okay, I whispered. I just felt something. Robert stepped closer, eyes wide. She showed you? That quickly? I nodded. It wasn't clear, just impressions. That's how it starts, he said. She trusts you. The older dog sat down beside Max, their bodies touching. Max lowered his head and rested it gently against hers. A sigh escaped me. What does she want? As if answering my question, the older dog suddenly stood and walked a few steps down the porch path before turning back. Max stood too. He nudged my hand. The connection pulsed with a clear message. Follow. I looked at Robert. Where is she trying to take us? He exhaled slowly. If I had to guess, somewhere important. They don't guide without purpose. But it's getting dark, I murmured. Max nudged me again, more firmly this time. Follow. The message was unmistakable. I grabbed Max's leash, though he rarely needed it, and stepped down onto the path. The older dog waited patiently at the end of the walkway, her gaze shifting between Max and me. Robert followed us out, worry flickering in his eyes. I'll come with you, at least for a little bit. I want to understand too. We walked down the street slowly, guided by the quiet older dog leading the way. The fading light painted the neighborhood in soft hues of gold and blue. Porch lights flicked on one by one as we passed, The air felt different, charged, expectant, like the world was holding its breath. As we reached the park at the end of the block, the older dog stopped and looked toward the trees. I felt a stirring through the connection, an emotional thread pulling Max forward. "Do we go inside?" I asked. Before Max could respond, a familiar voice called from behind. "Danielle!" I turned to see Laura walking toward us with her son, Evan, a few steps behind her. They both stopped when they noticed the older dog. Laura blinked in surprise. "Is that yours?" I shook my head. "No, she showed up at my house." Max walked to Evan and pressed against his leg. Evan's face softened immediately, his hand dropping to pet Max. The older dog watched them with quiet curiosity. Evan crouched. "She's beautiful." She approached him without hesitation. The moment she reached him, I felt a gentle tug through the connection, a whisper of emotion passing from her into Max, then into me. Sadness, pain, hidden worry. Evan inhaled sharply, like he felt something too. He looked up at me. "She seems like she's been through a lot." He was right, and the older dog's eyes softened as if acknowledging the truth. Laura placed a hand over her heart. "Why is she here?" Before I could respond, the older dog suddenly turned and began walking toward the line of tall trees at the edge of the park. Max stepped forward immediately. "Follow." The message returned, stronger now. I swallowed and nodded to the others. "We're going with her." Laura hesitated. "Is it safe?" Max looked back at me, steady, certain. "Yes." I touched Laura's arm. "You don't have to come if you're worried." She looked at Evan, at Max, then at the older dog disappearing into the trees. "No," she said quietly. "We're coming." We followed the two dogs through the park. The trees formed a canopy above us, filtering the remaining sunlight into soft, dappled shadows. The air cooled significantly as we moved deeper, the scent of pine growing stronger. Max stayed close to the older dog, occasionally glancing back at me with reassurance. We walked for several minutes, guided only by the dog's unerring instinct. Finally, we emerged into a small clearing hidden from view, unless you knew exactly where to find it. Moonlight filtered through the treetops, illuminating the center of the clearing. The older dog walked directly to the middle and sat down. Max joined her. They both looked at me. The emotion that hit me through the connection was unlike anything I'd felt before. Urgency, not fear, need. A message pressing against the edges of my mind, too complex for words. I stepped into the clearing. Evan and Laura stopped behind me. Robert stepped forward slowly. "What is this place?" I whispered. The older dog lifted her head and released a soft sound. Not quite a bark, not quite a whine. A note filled with emotion. Then she looked toward the far edge of the clearing. Footsteps echoed. My breath caught. A figure emerged from the shadows. A white American man, mid-30s, wearing a forest green jacket and carrying a walking stick. His expression was gentle, his gaze quiet and thoughtful. The older dog stood and trotted to him, brushing her body against his leg. He knelt and stroked her head lovingly. Then he looked at me and smiled softly. "You must be Danielle. I've been waiting to meet you." "You've been waiting to meet me?" The words slipped out before I could steady my breath, because nothing about this moment felt ordinary. The clearing itself was quiet and still, the air cool with night settling in. But everything inside me pulsed with a mixture of curiosity, confusion, and something like awe. Max stood firmly at my side, his body relaxed but alert, his tail low, and his head turned slightly as if listening to something deeper than the sounds around us. The older golden retriever stayed close to the stranger, her calm presence almost protective. The man stepped forward slowly, careful not to frighten anyone. His voice was soft when he spoke. "I'm sorry for appearing out of nowhere like this, but I promise I mean no harm. My name is Samuel Hart." He nodded politely at Laura, Evan, and Robert, then looked at me again with a calm patience that made it nearly impossible to feel threatened. "And yes, my dog here has been leading me to you for a while now." My eyes flicked to the older retriever, whose fur shimmered gently in the moonlight. She glanced from Samuel to Max, then to me again, her eyes filled with quiet intelligence. I had sensed something deeply familiar in her before, something Max recognized instantly. Now, watching her sitting next to Samuel like an old companion, I felt that same stirring again, the gentle ripple of emotion reaching into Max's connection and brushing against me. Samuel seemed to sense the question forming in my mind. "Her name is Lumen," he said softly. "She's been searching for Max for months, or rather, searching for the one Max would choose." A chill moved over my skin. Choose? Choose for what? Max nudged my hand gently, sending a wave of reassurance through the connection. But he didn't move away from Samuel or Lumen. He was watching, waiting, absorbing every moment with the quiet intensity he always held when something truly important was happening. Robert stepped forward cautiously. "You said you've been looking for her before," he murmured, nodding toward Lumen. "But we've never met. How do you know Willow? How do you know anything about dogs like these?" Samuel smiled, though it carried a weight behind it, like someone who had spent years carrying secrets and wasn't quite sure how to set them down. "Because I had a dog like Max once," he said, "and that dog led me into a world I didn't fully understand at the time. A world I've spent my life trying to follow ever since." His eyes softened with memory. Willow wasn't the only one. There have been others, small in number, scattered through the generations, but bonded by something deeper than instinct or training, something that ties them together. I took a slow breath, my heart beating harder. "What do you mean? What ties them together?" He knelt beside Lumen and ran a hand gently through her fur. They carry a shared awareness, a link passed down, not through words but through something older, something woven into the spirit of certain dogs. They're born with it. It isn't taught. It isn't forced. They're connected to each other in ways humans can't fully grasp. Max stepped closer to Samuel, sniffing his hand. Then he lifted his head and looked directly into Samuel's eyes. The connection flared, warm, vibrant, pulsing with recognition. Samuel let out a breath. "You feel it too, don't you, Max?" he murmured. My throat tightened. "How do you know his name?" "You said it," he replied calmly. I shook my head. "No, not once since you arrived." Samuel blinked slowly, as if realizing something at the same time I did. His gaze moved to Max. "You told him, didn't you?" Max's tail moved slightly, a soft sweep across the grass. A burst of warmth filled the connection, not words, not images, but a gentle affirmation. Max trusted him, completely. Samuel turned back to me. Dogs like Max don't just read thoughts. They reach out. When they trust someone, they share just enough to bridge the silence. Not fully, but enough. Evan, standing behind me, spoke softly. "So, he can talk to you too?" "Not talk," Samuel said. "Feel, understand. Dogs like Max communicate in ways humans don't have the vocabulary for." He glanced at Max with a small smile. "And he's telling me you're scared, Danielle." I swallowed hard. I'm not scared, just overwhelmed. Samuel nodded thoughtfully. You have every reason to be. But let me explain why Lumen came to you. Lumen stepped forward and sat in front of me. She pressed her forehead gently against my knee. A surge of emotion washed through me. Soft, warm, steady. Like the comforting warmth of a memory I didn't fully recognize but somehow felt familiar with. Samuel spoke quietly. She's showing you a piece of the connection she carries. She's showing you trust. I exhaled slowly. Why me? He looked at Max. Because Max chose you. And dogs like him never choose without purpose. His tone grew more serious. Once they form a bond with someone, their awareness sharpens, their senses expand, and the world around them begins to unfold in ways that draw them toward what's coming. A shiver went down my spine. What's coming? Samuel didn't answer immediately. He looked into the trees, his expression thoughtful, almost haunted. I can't tell you for certain. I only know what the others sensed before Max did, and what Willow sensed before she passed. Robert stepped closer. What did Willow sense? Samuel took a deep breath. A shift. Something new. Something emerging in the world that only dogs like them can detect. Something that isn't dangerous, but powerful. Lumen lifted her head, her eyes meeting Max's again. The feeling through our connection intensified. Urgent, yet warm, almost hopeful. Samuel continued. These dogs feel the world differently. They sense the emotions of people around them, the unseen threads that connect us all. When those threads shift, even slightly, they feel it long before we ever do. I nodded slowly, remembering Max's strange alertness over the past few days. The sudden wake-ups at night, the watching, the tension that wasn't fear, but anticipation. Lisa, who had been quiet until now, whispered, "Is it something bad?" "No," Samuel said firmly. "Nothing bad. It's something good, something necessary." He met my gaze again. "But it requires people like you, Danielle. People they choose. People who listen." The clearing fell silent again. The wind rustled the leaves above us, sending a soft shiver of sound across the grass. Then Samuel motioned for us to sit. "Let me tell you everything I've learned. It will take time." We all sat in a rough circle. Me, Laura, Evan, Robert, Samuel, and the two dogs settled themselves between us. Max rested his head on my leg, and Lumen lay beside Samuel, her tail brushing gently against Max's side. Samuel began. The first dog known to have this ability was documented over a century ago. He belonged to a woman who lived in rural Montana. She wrote journals about him, stories passed down through her family. The dog could sense when someone in the town needed help, even miles away. He would disappear and return hours later, exhausted, but always knew where to go. He paused, letting the weight of that sink in. Max shifted against me, and I felt a low thrum of connection, interest, understanding. These dogs weren't just intuitive, Samuel continued. They carried a kind of awareness that passed down through generations. Every few litters, one pup would be born with the trait, born able to sense emotions, read intentions, and connect deeply with one chosen person. "So it's genetic?" I asked. "Partly," he said. "But it's also something deeper, something spiritual, something carried through memory and instinct. Lumen carries it. Max carries it. Willow carried it." Robert's eyes grew soft with memory. "Willow always knew when I was hurting, even when I didn't say a word." Samuel nodded. "Exactly." Laura whispered, "So why now? Why here?" "Because," Samuel said gently, Something is unfolding in the world, something these dogs understand long before we do. The last time dogs like them gathered was decades ago, when emotional turmoil surged through entire communities. Evan frowned. Turmoil? Not war, Samuel corrected softly. Not disasters. Emotional turmoil. The kind people carry inside them when they feel lost, disconnected, or alone. These dogs sense the threads of emotion as clearly as we see color. And lately, he looked at Max and Lumen. Those threads have been shifting. I felt Max lean against me more firmly. The connection pulsed, steady and warm. What does that mean? I asked. It means, Samuel said, voice low and certain, that people will need dogs like Max more than ever. And dogs like him will seek out the people they're meant to heal. He sighed. But they can't do it alone. They need their human partners. They need you. A weight settled in my chest. Not heavy, but profound. I looked down at Max, whose eyes lifted to meet mine with a tenderness that made my heart ache. But why me? I whispered. Samuel tilted his head thoughtfully. Because Max saw something in you long before you ever knew what he could do. He saw steadiness, kindness. He saw someone capable of carrying the emotional weight of others. Someone who listens, not just with her mind, but with her heart. I blinked back sudden tears. I'm not special. Max nudged my hand firmly. Yes, you are, Samuel said gently. Max knows it. Lumen knows it. And now, so do I. A breeze rustled the treetops above us. Lumen rose and walked slowly to the center of the clearing. Max followed her. They stood together, side by side, and turned to face us. The connection surged like a wave, a message, one I couldn't fully translate, but could feel deep in my bones. Not danger, not fear. Beginning. Something is beginning. The dogs held their positions, watching us, their presence steady and profound. And in that moment, under the moonlit sky, surrounded by people whose lives had already been touched by Max's gift, I understood that whatever came next would be larger than anything I'd imagined. Not an ending, a start, a shift. And Max was ready. So was Lumen. And now, I was too. Max wants us to follow him again. The thought struck me the moment he stepped forward, leaving Lumen's side to nudge my hand with quiet insistence. The connection between us tightened with a steady, pulsing urgency. Not frightening, not overwhelming, but persistent. Like a soft drumbeat, guiding us deeper into something none of us fully understood yet. Lumen stood beside Samuel, watching Max and me with calm expectation, her tail sweeping lightly across the grass as if to encourage us onward. The night air settled coolly around us, carrying the faint scent of earth and pine as the clearing dimmed beneath the rising moon. Samuel didn't move at first. He watched Max closely, as though trying to decipher the meaning behind every shift in his posture. He's not finished, he murmured. This isn't the end of what he wants to show you. His tone held no fear. Only a knowing certainty formed from years of observing dogs like Max, dogs who didn't act without purpose. I took a breath to steady myself. Everything that had happened in the past days, the strangers Max was drawn to, the emotional echoes he shared, the arrival of Lumen, the revelations from Samuel, had created a world that felt both entirely new and strangely familiar. Max wasn't just reacting to events around us. He was guiding us. And now, as he stepped toward the far side of the clearing, his gaze fixed on something unseen beyond the line of trees. I felt that quiet, but unmistakable pull. Follow. I rose slowly, brushing dirt from my palms. The others mirrored my movement, Laura standing beside Evan as he adjusted his jacket, Robert tightening his grip on his notebook, and Samuel lifting himself with the aid of his walking stick. Lumen padded forward to join Max, nudging his side gently in a way that felt almost like encouragement. "Where is he taking us?" Evan asked softly. "Somewhere important," Samuel said. "They don't guide without meaning. Just stay close." He met my gaze with a steady look. "Max trusts you the most. If anything happens, he'll tell you first." The weight of that statement settled over me like a blanket, the kind of weight that wasn't heavy, but grounding. I nodded, then turned to Max. "Okay, show us." My voice barely rose above a whisper, but Max heard it. He looked back with warm certainty, then trotted forward, guiding us toward the darkened entrance of the forest. We moved in a slow line behind him. Leaves rustled gently beneath our footsteps. The trees closed in above us, forming a canopy that filtered the moonlight into silvery streaks across the forest floor. The deeper we went, the quieter the world became. Even the usual nighttime chorus of insects and far-off traffic faded, leaving only the sound of our footsteps and the steady rhythm of Max's breathing. Lumen remained at his side, occasionally brushing against him in silent communication. Every so often, Max would pause and glance back, checking to make sure we were all still following. Each time, emotion pulsed through the connection. Reassurance, guidance, trust. Eventually, the forest opened into another clearing, smaller than the one we came from, but steeped in a quiet stillness that felt ancient, untouched, as though the world outside had never quite managed to reach this far. The moonlight pooled here in soft silver ripples, scattering across the patchy grass. Max walked straight to the center and sat, his tail curling around his paws. Lumen sat beside him. "What happens now?" Laura whispered. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because I felt something. Something deep and stirring through the connection, like Max was reaching for something just beyond his own understanding. Samuel stepped into the clearing, his eyes widening slightly. "This place. I've seen one like it before." We turned toward him as he took a few slow steps forward. "Years ago, Willow led me to a clearing just like this," he said. "Different location, different team, but the same feeling, the same energy." He lowered himself to sit on a fallen log. "She brought me there when she realized something about her connection, when she sensed something not just in people, but in other dogs like her." Robert leaned forward. "What did she sense?" Samuel looked at Max and Lumen, then back at us. Another bond forming, a change awakening. His gaze softened. A beginning. The word struck me, not with fear, but with an echo of the feeling Max had shared earlier. Beginning. Max lifted his head, his eyes fixed on the dark edge of the trees. The connection shimmered faintly, carrying a ripple of emotion I couldn't quite name. Anticipation mixed with something like hope. Lumen mirrored his posture, ears alert, gaze steady. Then, from the shadows, movement. A soft rustling sound grew louder, deliberate, measured. My muscles tensed, but Max didn't move. His mind touch pressed into mine, soothing my nerves, telling me there was no danger. A shape emerged from the trees. Another dog, a younger golden retriever. Not a puppy, but youthful, strong, with bright, intelligent eyes that sparkled under the moonlight. Its fur was a soft honey color, and its posture was alert but relaxed, as though it knew exactly who we were and had been waiting for this moment. The dog walked calmly into the clearing and stopped a few feet from Max and Lumen. Lumen stood first. She approached the younger dog slowly, touching noses with it in greeting. The connection between Max and me trembled again. Recognition, familiarity, something passed down through instinct. Then Max stood and joined them. The three of them formed a loose circle in the center of the clearing, their bodies still, their attention focused inward. "What's happening?" Evan whispered. Nobody answered, because none of us could have explained it, not even Samuel, who watched with reverent stillness. Max stepped forward and touched his forehead gently to the younger dog's shoulder. The younger dog responded by lowering its head, then meeting Max's gaze. And in that instant, a surge of emotion rushed through the connection, so strong, so vivid, that I gasped. Warmth, trust, memory, recognition, a bond. The younger dog wasn't here by accident. Samuel rose, breath unsteady. "It's happening again, just like with Willow." He turned to me. "This dog, it's part of their lineage, maybe even connected to Max in ways we can't understand yet." The younger Golden took a few steps back, then looked directly at me. The connection pulsed, not like Max's warm, steady presence. Different, a distant echo, a flicker, a greeting. Max nudged the younger dog, encouraging it. The dog approached me slowly, tail sweeping gently from side to side. When it reached me, it sat and lifted a paw. My breath caught. I extended my hand, and the dog placed its paw gently in my palm. A spark of emotion shot through me, faint but unmistakable. "Does this one have the ability to?" I asked quietly. Samuel nodded. "Oh yes, but it's young, untested, learning." His eyes flicked to Max, and Max called it here. Max brushed against my leg. The connection swelled with clarity, not words, not images, a feeling. Teach. He wanted to teach the younger dog. My chest tightened. "What does that mean?" Samuel let out a breath. "It means Max is stepping into something larger. Dogs like him don't just sense the world. They guide the next generation of their kind." Lumen released a soft, low sound, a warm rumble that vibrated through the clearing. Max echoed it. The younger dog responded, a soft, gentle whine that held the tone of recognition. I looked at Samuel. "So this is like a gathering?" Samuel nodded. "It's more than that. It's an awakening of their shared awareness, a moment of alignment, something that only happens when a major shift is coming." "What kind of shift?" Laura asked nervously. Samuel didn't respond immediately. He glanced at Lumen, then at Max, as though waiting for some kind of permission. Finally, he spoke. "A shift in the emotional landscape of people. A rise in loneliness, a rise in disconnection. People are feeling lost in ways they don't talk about. And dogs like these, their awareness sharpens when emotional needs around them rise. Their abilities expand. They gather so they can guide." Evan's voice was quiet. "So they're here to help people?" "Yes," Samuel said softly. "And they will." Max and the younger dog broke their circle and approached me together. Lumen stood behind them, her presence steady and reassuring. The younger dog pressed its head against my leg. Max did the same. The message pulsed through the connection. Gentle, loving, sure. "You're ours." The words weren't spoken, but they settled into my chest with a warmth that felt like sunlight. I knelt, wrapping my arms around Max, then reaching to stroke the younger dog's soft fur. The younger dog leaned into my touch, unafraid, trusting me with a bond it clearly felt deeply. Lumen approached last, placing her head gently against my shoulder. Emotion washed over me in waves. Warmth, reassurance, unity. Samuel's voice broke through the quiet. "You're the center of this, Danielle. You and Max. You're the anchor these dogs sought, the person they chose to connect their awareness to." My heart pounded. "But why me?" "Because Max chose you," Samuel said simply, "and these dogs follow trust." The clearing glowed faintly in the moonlight as all 3 dogs stood around me. The moment stretched out, deep and intimate, filled with emotion I didn't have words for. But then, another shift. The younger dog lifted its head sharply, ears perked. Lumen did the same. Max stiffened beside me. A new emotion surged through the connection, stronger than anything before. Not fear, not danger. A call, a distant emotional thread pulling at them. Something out there in the world that needed them. Max pressed urgently against my side. "Follow." It was coming again. Something new. Something waiting. And Max was already choosing our next step. "Max, where are you taking us?" I whispered, though I already knew he was too focused to answer with anything other than emotion. The connection between us pulsed with urgency, steady and clear, but completely free of fear. Whatever he sensed wasn't a threat. It was a need, a call pulling him forward with quiet insistence. Lumen and the younger dog stayed close, both reacting to the same distant pull, their postures alert but calm. Samuel watched them with an expression that blended respect and understanding, as if he had seen this moment forming long before any of us recognized it. The others stood behind me, waiting for me to move. I stepped forward. That was all the dogs needed. Max immediately walked ahead, the younger Golden falling into step on his right, Lumen on his left. They led us out of the clearing and into the darker stretch of forest. The moon lit our path in thin silver strands, just enough for us to see where we stepped. I followed closely, feeling the connection soften and widen, like Max was preparing me for something he didn't want me to be afraid of. After several quiet minutes, the trees opened onto a narrow dirt trail that curved gently downhill. I recognized the direction. We were walking toward the far edge of the park, the side that bordered the neighborhood, but was rarely used. Max picked up his pace, ears perked, eyes focused on something ahead that only he could sense. Then I saw it. A soft glow flickered at the bottom of the trail. At first I thought it was a streetlight catching through the branches, but as we stepped closer, I realized it was coming from something small and moving. A person, a young girl. She sat curled up beside the trail, hugging her knees to her chest. Her face was hidden, but the faint, uneven tremble in her shoulders told us she had been crying for a long time. She appeared no older than 10. A small backpack lay beside her. She looked lost, frightened in a quiet and contained way that made my heart twist. Max slowed, lowering his head and wagging his tail gently. The younger dog stayed just behind him, mirroring his calmness, and Lumen kept a protective stance slightly to the side. I felt a wave of emotion through the connection, not from Max, but from her. Deep sadness, confusion, fear she didn't know how to voice. I knelt slowly, keeping my voice soft. "Hi there, are you okay?" The girl flinched at the sound, but didn't run. Her eyes lifted just enough for me to see they were red and swollen. Max walked forward with steady, gentle steps and sat just a foot away from her. He didn't touch her. He didn't lean in. He simply offered his presence, waiting for her to decide what she needed from him. After a moment, she reached out a shaky hand and placed it on Max's fur. The second she touched him, her breath hitched, and a tiny sob slipped out. Max leaned in then, resting his head on her knee. The connection hit me immediately. Pure emotion. Strong and aching. Her loneliness washed through Max and into me, but so did a flicker of something softer. Trust. She felt safe. The girl whispered, "I didn't know where to go." I moved closer, keeping my tone warm. "You don't have to be alone. We're right here. What's your name?" She wiped at her cheeks. "Mia." "Mia," I said gently. "Is someone looking for you?" She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I got upset and ran out. I didn't want to scare anyone. I just didn't know what to do when I wanted to go home." Max nudged her hand again, and she let out a shaky breath that sounded just a little steadier than before. Samuel stepped forward, his voice soft. "Where do you live, Mia?" She pointed toward a row of houses across the park. "Just over there." I reached out my hand to her. "Let's walk you home, okay? Max found you for a reason." She looked at Max, understanding something in his eyes that didn't need words. He knew I was here. "Yes," I said quietly. "He really did." Mia stood, still holding on to Max for balance. The younger golden retriever walked beside her, gently bumping her leg, as if offering extra encouragement. Lumen stayed behind us, keeping watch. The walk back was slow, careful. Mia talked in small pieces, about how she'd had a hard day at school, about feeling like no one understood her, about being afraid of worrying her parents. And every time she hesitated, Max brushed against her hand, grounding her. When we reached her house, a woman burst out the front door, her face streaked with tears. "Mia!" she cried, rushing forward. Mia let go of Max and ran into her mother's arms. The relief that radiated from both of them was so strong, I felt it even without Max's connection. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering thank you over and over as she realized Mia hadn't been alone in the dark after all, that Max had brought her back. After they were safely inside, the rest of us walked back toward the park. The air felt lighter now, not because anything monumental had happened, but because Max had followed the thread of emotion exactly where it needed to lead. Samuel looked at me as we reached the path. "Do you understand now?" I nodded slowly. "Yes. It's not just about sensing emotions. It's about guiding people through them, helping them in ways we can't always see." "Exactly," he said. "This is what they were meant for, not just to read, but to heal." We walked in companionable silence until the trees opened again and the moon shone brighter over our small group. Lumen nuzzled the younger golden, and he responded with a soft sound that felt like appreciation. Max moved beside me, pressing his body warmly against my leg, and through the connection came a surge of emotion so tender it made my eyes sting. Home, not a place, a feeling, a bond. I knelt and wrapped my arms around him. "Thank you," I whispered into his fur, "for everything." He leaned into me fully, his warmth steady and solid against my chest. Samuel stepped closer, his voice gentle. "This is the end of one path and the beginning of many others. Max will keep guiding you, and you'll keep guiding him. That's how these bonds work." A soft breeze moved through the clearing, rustling the leaves in a calm, rhythmic whisper. The moment felt whole, complete. Lumen walked to Samuel's side. The younger dog approached Max, touching noses briefly before settling in comfortably at my other side. Everything was quiet. Everything was peaceful. And I understood then that Max's ability was never about extraordinary powers or mysteries waiting to be solved. It was about small moments that changed lives quietly. Moments like the man on the park bench. Evan. Mia. Me. All of us touched by a dog who could feel the world more deeply than any of us could ever explain. As the moon rose higher and the night wrapped gently around us, I finally stood, placing a hand on Max's back. "Come on," I said softly. "Let's go home." Max turned toward the path without hesitation. Lumen and the younger retriever followed a few steps behind, their tails swaying in a relaxed rhythm. And as we walked back toward the neighborhood lights, the connection between Max and me glowed with a warm, steady truth. This wasn't an ending. It was the peace that comes after a journey, where everything that needed to be discovered had been found, and everything that needed to be healed had begun to mend. Max brushed against my leg one last time, his mind touch soft and certain. Together. And in that moment, I knew with absolute clarity that whatever paths lay ahead, we would navigate them side by side, guided by a bond deeper than words, held together by a dog who could read hearts, shape hope, and quietly change everything.